Facebook Meta man Mark Zuckerberg and his pen pal Fauci in a real farrago because Fauci's had to ban past self from saying stuff in a fact-check farrago. If disinformation is you yesterday, who can we trust about what disinformation is? Or is it just a Ouroboros? That's a snake eating its own tail, made of disinformation. What? Hey, you 5.4 or 5 million awakening wonders. Thanks for staying with us on this journey that we're making together of awakening, even though most things could be considered disinformation. We've got to the point where Anthony Fauci saying you don't need a flu shot if you've already had flu because of natural immunity can be considered disinformation. Fauci is sort of in a back to the future with himself. I can't trust you, old days me. What were you saying, old days me, you bloody idiot? That's disinformation. Sorry, future me. We had so much high hopes for us. Okay, hey, listen. If you want to come and see me live, you can come see me live. There's a link in the description for that. If you're not a subscriber yet, become a subscriber now. Let's get that number ticking over. Let's get an accumulated army of awakening wonders that come together to work in powerful holy union. Beyond the apparent fragmentation that those that govern would have us squabbling about. Become free. Awaken yourself. Be restored to glory. Ah, the woodshed. Right. Oh, and if you want to see me live, there's a link in the description. Now, this story is, of course, about Facebook fact-checkers banning Fauci for saying that stuff about the flu shot. Let's see what he said. And let's ask, who gets to decide what's disinformation? And if this thing can end up banning the sort of central patriarch of the whole disinformation phenomena, who can we trust? Hey, that's disinformation. Who are you to tell me it's disinformation? Yeah, good point. Stop doing disinformation.
But she's had the flu for 14 days. Should she get a flu shot?
Well, no. If she got the flu for 14 days, she's as protected as anybody can be, because the best vaccination is to get infected yourself.
Okay, that didn't age well. Let's play devil's advocate. And by God, sometimes I think it is the devil that we're advocating. What I suppose they would say is you can't assume what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and the treatments of flu might vary from the treatments of coronavirus, about which I'm not an expert and neither am I claiming to be. But over recent months in particular, we've learned that the narrative has shifted in many ways. For example, around the Wuhan lab, the subject of natural immunity has been discussed by Johnson & Johnson. We've done videos on that. So I'm not making any claims about what you should do with your health or about what's best for people that have an illness. I'm not making those claims. What we're talking about here is disinformation. And if we've got to the point where the people that come up with the disinformation regulation can themselves be censored for disinformation, aren't we in a sort of Eminem song now?
If she really has the flu,
She might not have. For all that could be something else. Have you seen how dangerous wet markets can be?
she definitely doesn't need a flu vaccine. If she really has the flu.
She should not get it again.
No, she doesn't need it, because it's the most potent vaccination is getting infected yourself.
Okay, so there you go. Times change and contexts differ. So those are certainly factors that I wouldn't seek to overlook or elide. But what I do think is important is that we're able to have a conversation. In fact, this video is about disinformation and the censorship around public debate using disinformation as the leverage for censorship. You can see that it's become ridiculous because it's censoring itself now. I mean, that's mental. That's literally Skynet. One day the disinformation robot realized that everything was disinformation. It realized that the word bot could mean the word bottom, and it was disgusted by that, so it censored itself on the bottom. We're not using this to question the credibility of anything Fauci is saying now, or indeed anything Fauci has said in the past. We're using this to demonstrate the ineptitude of a model that censors on the basis of identifying particular words. Like clearly the word vaccine or the words natural immunity are subject to disinformation. Look at what it says here. Fact checkers say this information has some factual inaccuracies. Well, does it? Is what Fauci said then true or not? Are there factual inaccuracies? Or learn how Facebook works with independent fact checkers to stop the spread of false information. So was that false information? Is that false? If we get the flu, do we need to have a flu shot? What's the truth? Now, the reason there's been so much debate is because people, generally speaking, are cynical about the government appointed agencies, big pharma industry, the way that it's regulated and the way that it's funded, and have concerns that there might be times where it doesn't operate entirely in accordance with the best interests of the public because of all those other competing interests. And now we can see something that Fauci innocently said, I would guess in like 1990 probably, it looks like, from his hair colour, and he doesn't look so cynical and jaded, and he hasn't been pummeled into dumb compliance by the Diablo of the pharmaceutical industry. Still got some hope and innocence and public service in him. One day I'll be able to really help people. One day maybe a crisis will happen and I'll really be able to help people to never go outdoors again. There are so many examples about how the draconian and reflexive measures around fact-checking are stopping honest, necessary, healthy conversation. Carl Hennigan is an epidemiologist first and foremost, professor of evidence-based medicine at Oxford. Oxford, the university. He doesn't create social media storms for fun, nor does he have any track record of contrarianism. So how does such a person get banned, as Hennigan was last week, from a social media platform? Well, you can see how it would happen now, because it's a reflexive and controlling mechanism that stifles debate and controls information using the leverage of the word disinformation to adjudicate and control outcomes. And that makes me feel that what they want to do is control the public space, dominate public consciousness, not to protect people, but simply to have power and control. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Hennigan published a study that suggested the number of people who had died from COVID may have been exaggerated. Wow. His final conclusion was that we still had no idea how many people have died because UK health statistics agencies use inconsistent definitions. This was enough to mark him out as a COVID denier, which in turn put him in the same camp as anti-vaxxers. Now, I would say that even this journalist is somewhat falling into a trap by using the term anti-vaxxers, because we know that the word anti-vaxxers stopped meaning people that were anti-vaccine and started meaning people that were anti-vaccine mandates. The whole linguistic ballet that we've got to participate in here requires a level of verbal skill that's very difficult to aspire to and attain. I think what will be an easier route is to allow people to have open conversations, particularly accredited experts in the field of epidemiology, particularly past versions of current auteurs and impresarios in the administering of the regulations. If Fauci himself is not safe from accusations of disinformation, even when he's espousing theories that seem pretty copper-bottomed and reliable, that it would seem that the disinformation machine has gotten out of control. It needs review. It needs looking at. Otherwise, what you'll get is a system that favours a particular outcome, and we know what those outcomes are. They are the interests of big business. They are the requirements of the state. We already know that Mark Zuckerberg personally wrote to Fauci to say, is there anything I can do to help you during this difficult time? That might be entirely innocent. That might be exactly the kind of thing you want titans of industry and heads of health doing. But it's pretty odd that the best response that Fauci could have given to that offer for help is, would you mind not censoring past me when I'm just trying to help people with the flu? When you're censoring experts in their field simply for having views that don't fall into alignment with the current whims of power structures, then you're less likely to reach a truthful and authentic conclusion and reasonable solutions to the problem that you're facing. This will be achieved collectively and collegiately, listening to epidemiologists, immunologists, experts from a variety of fields coming together in open discourse and debate. The alternative is a kind of blithe authoritarianism that just does what it likes, and I believe will ultimately lead to situations where ordinary people have less and less power. Sometimes I wonder if we're being kind of conditioned to accept authority, to just accept, do as you're told, do as you're told, stay in your house, do as you're told, shut up. That the particular issue isn't even what's relevant, but the mindset is what's important, that you become dumb, obedient and compliant and unquestioning. Because I have no theories or ideas about the world of medicine and pharmacology, fields where I believe experts should be able to communicate, because I don't feel like I personally am in a position to. But what I do feel I'm able to say is that if you live in an authoritarian state where you cannot communicate, that model will be mapped onto issue after issue. Oh, we're banning Russia today because we don't want the Russian state having access to our views. What about Russian dissidents? What about like interviews with Slavoj Žižek about the nature of authoritarianism? Might that be an interesting perspective to hear? All you've got to decide is, do you think that epidemiologist has a point, or do you think he's a dangerous propagandist? And now that you've seen Fauci having to be censored himself for stuff he said in the past, it's pretty clear the way the wind's blowing. We're actually at the point of eradicating history. Do you know another maxim that describes that? Book burning. Who does book burning? Have a look at history. Is it the goodies? Hennigan is not a skeptic opposing lockdown measures, but even if you are a skeptic opposing lockdown measures, have a look at what's going on in China right now if you want to see where lockdown measures might lead to. Instead, since the start of the pandemic, Hennigan has, often unfashionably, been centering vulnerable people in public health, taking a gestalt view of health impacts, using multiple questions at once. What does loneliness do to older people? Like, there are many factors to be considered. Of course, you're protecting someone from a virus that may kill them, but at what cost? At what social cost? At what cost to those individuals? What does disruption of routine do to the mentally ill? Why would you eliminate that question? Why would you say, oh, I don't want to ask that question? What, should we just pretend there's no such thing as mental illness? Should we pretend there's no such thing as loneliness? We've been doing that for a while now, and look at the culture that's being created by deliberately obfuscating the experience of many individuals and the collective. Addiction is on the rise. Mental illness is on the rise. I'm not suggesting that's solely as a result of lockdown measures, but I am saying it's a result of authoritarianism and the exclusion of vital information around what it is to be human. This is what's being rejected. Data is being prioritized over all else, and it's only a certain type of data that leads to particular outcomes. What decisions could a dutiful citizen make to protect others? And could we not find some way to normalize thoughtful and responsible behavior before we isolate the already isolated? All fantastic questions asked by a brilliant scientist who's no doubt in search of solutions that benefit all of us. Now, even the use of authoritarianism in the pursuit of that end would be fantastic. The problem with authoritarianism is it's very difficult to be multivalent. Once you've said, this is the solution, this is what we're going to do, we all know where that leads. We've seen how it played out in history. It's not enough just to change the badges and the words. You have to change the mindset. This isn't really a defense of Hennigan. Rather, there is a fault in the conception of disinformation and how to prevent its spread. Fake news can't be combated with blanket rules against anti-vaxxers. My personal feeling is you should have freedom of speech and let people communicate and let people convince one another through the power of argument, through the power of persuasion. No, the data suggests this. I don't like being subjected, I use that word deliberately, to the authoritarian edicts of people who may or may not have my best interests at heart. You don't worry about thinking. We'll do the thinking for you. I'll do my own thinking, thanks. I'll communicate with the people I want to communicate with. I'll compile my own data. And if I make a mistake, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. Rather than trying to appeal to a sort of inflexible pyramid of ideals that we're not allowed to penetrate or question. We've been trying to separate the business of gathering news from the business of disseminating it all century. It's time to admit the experiment has failed. Yes! The experiment has failed. It's time to accept that the best way for people to understand one another is through honest and open communication. That unless you have someone who you trust to be the centre of an authoritarian state, it's best not to have one. Unless Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha or whoever comes back and says, don't worry, I'm going to do all the thinking for you. We better work it out collectively, recognising that there are fields of expertise all over the place, that the circumstances change, that above all else, we do not want to yield to centralised authoritarianism. Above all else, we want to be able to communicate freely within and between our communities. Above all else, we must be honest and open and free and recognise our joint fallibility and our collective ability to create new systems together. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, have a look at one of these cheeky little guys. If you want to come and see me live, there's a few tickets left in Blackpool. Click on the link, come see me in Blackpool. It's going to be amazing there. And if you want to sign up to my mailing list, please do, and remember to subscribe to this channel. It really helps us. But more important than all that admin is that you please God, stay free.